gone to sleep. Goes to sleep.
Okay. Be all right, everyone. Welcome back tonight to another Policy and Resources Committee, so welcome everyone. This meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the Council website for up to 2 years. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting for your name, the content of what you say and your image to be broadcast and stored to the Council website. If any member, officer or member of the public addressing the committee has some concerns with this, please contact the Committee Services Officer immediately. For those at home viewing the webcast, I would like to inform you that if you look above the video, you will see a Resources tab. Select this and a link to the agenda will appear in the right-hand side, and this will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and debate. Agenda item 2 is apologies, and we have apologies from Councillor Liz Gray, Councillor Steve Fowkes is deputising. Don't have any others. Agenda item 3, Members' Code of Conduct. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. For the minutes, so can we approve the accuracy of the minutes, please? I'm going to move that we approve them. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 5 is public and member questions, and we have some questions from residents, so you're going to read them out. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. There are 2 questions from the public. Both have asked for those questions to be read on their behalf. The first is from a Susan Kirkham, and this is actions such as the Nottingham City Council workplace parking levy that has raised 25.3 million in the first 3 years, and licensing for the private rented sector to cover the enforcement costs of ensuring compliance with minimum energy efficiency standards. In the first 3 years of operation, the workplace parking levy in Nottingham raised 25.3 million of revenue, all of which has funded improvements in the city's transport infrastructure, including the largest fleet of electric buses. Recent research indicates that the levy has significantly contributed to a 33% fall in carbon emissions and a modal shift, which has seen public transport use rise to over 40%. The question is that given the local, national and climate goals and the Council's financial position, how is the Policy and Resources Committee ensuring that all actions and decisions within the Council are meeting our climate goals and are financially beneficial?
Okay, so I'm going to read the answer out. Wirral Council declared an environment and climate emergency in 2019, and in doing so established a corporate priority to respond to the emergency and influence others to do so. The Council has since established its environment and climate emergency policy, committing the Council to be net carbon neutral by 2030 and setting out the framework for doing so. A key element of the policy and carbon neutral commitment is for the Council to become a carbon literate organisation to ensure all decisions and future strategy are informed by their environment and climate impact. Since commencing carbon literacy training, 200 members and senior officers have attended the course. All Council reports set out the environment and climate impact of the recommendations being put forward. The Council also has a dedicated climate emergency team headed by the Climate Emergency Manager, and their role is to coordinate and drive the Council's Environment and Climate Emergency Action Plan. This includes working closely with senior regeneration and planning colleagues to support and advise on the development of the Council's growth strategy and local plan, both of which are setting out sustainability objectives, including build quality, future neighbourhood design, a range of development levies, including biodiversity net gain and prioritisation of active travel provision. The Council is a leading partner in the Cool Wirral Climate Change Partnership and supported the establishment of the Cool 2 Climate Change Strategy for Wirral and Net Zero target of 2041, which is Wirral's second strategy, commenced including a task force on low carbon building and an advanced position with a heat network pilot for the Birkenhead area. In terms of the levy on workplace parking, the Council is developing its post-COVID pandemic recovery strategy and new post-lockdown ways of working. This will involve a permanent shift to more home working and reduced estate. Therefore, it is premature to consider future parking arrangements of the provision, other than travel by car will be discouraged, and a greater investment of active travel facilities at the future operational hubs.
Thank you, Chair. The second question is from a Naomi Graham, who asks, the report accompanying the medium-term financial strategy coming before this committee currently states that the MTFS has no environment and climate implications. Could the committee ask officers to note that there are environment implications in all council spend decisions, and that there may be climate adaptations and risks that Wirral needs to address over the MTFS period? For example, using transport spend to reduce the impact on air pollution and improve health outcomes, to use all spend to increase the support for the local green economy, to consider spend decisions to improve health and well-being through green spaces, etc.
Thank you. So there are no environment and climate implications of producing an electronic medium-term financial strategy document, which is the subject of the report. The document sets a strategy framework for the 2022-2027 budget and medium-term financial plan. As part of the budget setting process for 2022-23, individual budget proposals will have robust business cases and equality impact assessments completed, and it will be in these documents where the implications for the environment and climate will be made. These documents will be available to the Policy and Resources Committee in the new calendar year, in line with the 2022-23 budget setting process. Thank you. So there are no statements or petitions and no member questions received. We go straight on to Section A, Budget and Performance Management, Agenda Item 6, which is the draft Medium-Term Financial Strategy. Chair, you're going to present this report. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, this is the medium-term financial strategy for the years 2022 to 2027. It's a 5-year rolling document, so we do update it every year for the forthcoming year. We have been reviewing this document and updating it during the summer, obviously for now next year's budget process 22-23. And since we've actually had the 2 reports from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities, we've taken the opportunity to review it further, because in those reports it did make reference and recommendations to say that the strategy wasn't explicit about the challenge of our budget process, and also that it didn't really align fully with the Wirral plan. So since those reports have been published, we have, as I say, taken the opportunity to revise it and actually make sure that it is in line with the Wirral plan as well. The strategy has been compiled in conjunction with all of the directors and with officers of the council, and also with the Policy and Resources budget subgroup. It's quite a lengthy document, as you can see within the pack, but it is important to have quite a lot of these sections in the document, because it does set out the framework to set the budget process for the following year and also the forthcoming next 4 years. At the Policy and Resources Committee on the 25th of October, a set of principles were agreed by yourselves that actually enabled us then to come and bring this medium-term financial strategy forward, which does set about how we are going to ensure financial sustainability for the coming 5 years. And in the appendices, there are several other policies and strategies that absolutely link into it to make sure that it is aligned to all of the other policy documents and strategies that we have across the council. As I say, it is quite lengthy, so we are going to take you through it in summary. And I'm going to invite Stuart Fair, who, as you know, is our new interim finance director, to come and take you through the main points of the strategy this evening. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, members, the medium-term financial strategy is a rolling 5-year model, as Chair had outlined. The report that's before you and the appendix that actually has the latest version pulls together all aspects of financial management. It includes all foundational strategies in financial management. We have treasury management, our borrowing strategy. It basically at its foundation is the financial strategy that supports the delivery of the Wirral Plan. Chair had outlined that the previous version had been criticised for not being founded in the Wirral Plan, and indeed what we have done is we have improved the strategy as a rolling document that meets all the recommendations of the Deluxe report, in that it provides a sustainable model for the production of a rolling financial position. There is a strategic deficit in there, a structural deficit, which will be eliminated by setting a balanced budget for 22-23. Thereafter, the balancing, it's a resetting of the balance. We will move that forward to 26-27, and that will become a realistic financial model for the Council. It will give the Council opportunity to look at additional threats and pressures in years to come and make decisions in advance of that. It will provide financial stability. It will allow members to make informed decisions in a way that will achieve financial balance. Achieving balance in the 22-23 budget is probably the biggest challenge of them all, because all things will flow from that, and the medium-term financial strategy document brings together the strategy with the actual numbers. Within it there is a financial plan, which is the actual numbers in the document that outline the deficit position, the structural deficit position at the moment. In moving that forward in the budget setting process, we will be eliminating the structural deficit by setting a balanced budget, and in doing that the members will be scrutinising all the savings that will be put before you, that will be integral to the actual, not just the annual budget for 22-23, but for the medium-term financial strategy thereafter. When this report was put together, there was a structural deficit of approximately 25 million. To balance the model, particularly for the 22-23 budget, there will be a requirement to deliver savings of 27 million. And I'll be talking about that later on in this session when I go through the budget setting process for 22-23, considering the pressures that we think we're going to have to deal with in 22-23, and the savings options that the directorates have already got in train, and the progress being achieved on that. The actual medium-term financial strategy document that's before you, I think is a good document. In a comparative terms, it favours well against others I've seen, and I've seen probably a bit nearer 100 of these in different organisations in my time with SITFA. It has all the ingredients of a robust financial strategy, and indeed it should deal with not just the Deluxe criticisms on the realism approach, but also Grant Thornton, the Council's external auditor, when the external auditor provided criticism that the financial balance and sustainability would be a challenge to the Council, and that the medium-term financial plan had to deal with not just the immediacy of the year in front of the Council, but for the medium term. The Deluxe recommendation on this was that we set a balanced medium-term financial strategy over 3 years. We're aiming to better that and extend that to 5 years, so that when we eliminate the structural deficit, the 5-year position is stable. We only have a capitalisation directive application for 2 years, 2021 and 21-22. The aggregate of those 2 years is about £14 million, It's unlikely that we'd be making any further application, so there'll be no capitalisation application in 22-23. So it's vital that we set the balanced budget and move forward so that there is no requirement for a capitalisation directive application in subsequent years. So that is the primary objective. We have a structural deficit of 7 million this year. That will grow because of the pressures that we've already cited on, or we're estimating for next year. The savings that we're wanting to take out, the net bottom line of the council, will ameliorate that and extinguish that. The different aspects of the strategy itself will help us in setting stability, adhering to a strong asset management strategy, treasury management strategy, borrowing strategy in terms of adhering to the Prudential Code, and compliance with prevailing good practice like the SITFA Financial Management Code will ensure that the council will be able to create a budget and medium-term financial strategy with some confidence to move forward. It may well feel like a step back in setting a budget with significant savings in it for 22-23 in terms of taking £27 million out, which is 8.3% of the net spend of the council for the first year of the medium-term financial strategy in 22-23. It may feel like a step back, but in fact, over the period of the medium-term financial strategy, it will allow 2 steps to be taken forward, in that to recalibrate and bring forward investment that will change services, will provide tangible benefits for Wirral constituents, in that the investment opportunities can be optimised and through the capital programme and investment in change, digitalisation and modernisation of services, and the optimisation of assets to bring forward services in one place for residents will make a big difference. So whilst it may well feel as if we're revenue poor, we will certainly be able to move forward on that and bring in the necessary investment that will transform the services for the council. So the medium-term financial strategy is not just a plan for the revenue budget, it's for everything. It's revenue, capital and the overarching position on the balance sheet. So it will provide the stability to bring in the necessary capital investment plans that will make a tangible difference. So in closing on the medium-term financial strategy, it's moving towards being a robust model for the council that will provide financial stability for the council. It will more than adequately, in my view, deal with all the criticisms from DLUC and the external auditor, and set forth a position of stability that will allow members to make reasoned decisions on resources from this point onwards.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Stuart? Jeff.
Thanks. Thanks, Stuart. I hadn't intended to speak this evening, but there you go. Does it have to be so long, Stuart? You know, if part of this is to be accessible and open and transparent, yeah, I don't want to insult members of the public, and I'm sure, or even other colleagues, I'm sure there's a whole lot of them that could understand this if they decide to wade through it. But it's a pretty heavy read. Is there not a way that this could be made, I don't know, more focused on those particular key elements? I'm sure there are legal niceties that have to go in it and all that, but could we not have a go at making it a bit sort of snappier and more accessible to people?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, the problem with the medium-term financial strategy, a local authority is a very complex organisation, probably the most complex public service organisation in the UK, the way it's constructed. Financial strategy is very wide. It covers a myriad of different aspects, from transactional finance to asset management and treasury management. It is incredibly complex. To bring everything together in the medium-term financial strategy is not a great read, but it gives stakeholders confidence and assurance that the Council is looking at all aspects of its financial modelling. There is numerous examples of councils that haven't done that and have taken their eye off the ball. One aspect of financial management, for instance borrowing, and they end up with the spectre of having insufficient headroom to actually borrow significant sums in capital programme that they really need to replace assets or renew assets. So it's difficult to shortchange any aspect of the medium-term financial strategy. What it does do front end, though, it sets out core principles on financial strategy and decision making, and in the document itself it sets out very, very early what the financial assumptions are in terms of the prioritisation of services in terms of money. It looks at how financial strategy can support the Wirral plan and sets out high levels of priority, such as the statutory services, the level of any cross-subsidisation between non-statutory service and statutory services. There is an expectation that the overheads are minimised where possible, and that investment can be realised and put back into the services. So it focuses on cost-effective service delivery. The set of principles at the very start, I think, are very valuable, and in a way that tries to communicate to readers at the start, particularly in paragraph 1.2, where it kind of wells together the Wirral plan and the medium-term financial strategy. And it may well be aspirational at that point, but within the paragraph above you get the real numbers. So it's trying to weld together numbers and our objectives and principles, and setting out principles like that in a strategy document is very, very valuable, particularly for stakeholders that might not want to wade through the detail later on and find out how the council manages its borrowing. But at the front end of it, it should give assurance to all stakeholders, and particularly Wirral residents. The council is very focused on managing their money for them. I suppose to answer your question, we could eliminate the appendices, which are not exciting for the non-finance reader, like risk management and capital strategies, etc. But the bare bones on financial stability are there. It provides transparency in what we do, and that's quite valuable, particularly when you see a whole host of councils who have got themselves into misadventure and financial difficulty because they haven't focused on the nuts and bolts, the pennies, the corners of the organisation that potentially could hemorrhage cash. This strategy aims to close off all the corners so that there is no area that could be overlooked. There's a real dependency in finance, and it's quite integrated. That if you have an implied pressure in one aspect of it, it usually manifests itself elsewhere, and it becomes difficult to, if you're unsighted on that, to make the right decisions, and and it's often done when it's too late. So this is trying to create the conditions so that officers and members can see problems well out. And for an example, if expected funding from central government is not going to come in, that there can be a reset or a recalibration of some other part of the model to compensate for that. But yeah, I mean, I do take your point. It's not really for the faint-hearted. But it's not. It's. I think I would.
Is
I
that
would
a no then, Stuart?
Yeah, I would say
Okay,
it's a
it's a
better
no.
read than the final accounts and reports, which for particularly the man and woman in the street is pretty intelligible, I would say, and is designed there to deliver assurance that it meets the proper accounting treatment and standards.
There you go. You see, as lengthy a response as a report. And thank you for that. But it was a no, effectively, wasn't it? Thanks, Stuart. Is anyone else? Steve?
I'm not normally a permanent member on here, so Stuart, but I have welcomed the objectives and principles which you talked about before, and I think that is particularly useful for elected members to use those as a sort of guiding principle during the decision-making process. But I can already see where some of those principles may be contradictory, and I welcome the alignment of the principles and objectives to the Wirral Plan, because it has felt sometimes the Wirral Plan and its outcomes have not always been the complete driving force for decision making, and that, you know, political pressures do come into that. There's no doubt about that. That is a fact of life, being a politician. But I do welcome the principles. But where we talk about, you know, set spending levels at the metropolitan average, well, there is some uniqueness about Wirral in certain areas, and I think at points we may have to justify the fact that Wirral is special. I think it may be the only peninsular council. I'm not sure of any others that are you know, geographically that way, and obviously the age of the population, and all of those things that come in. But I do welcome the guiding principles as a discipline for us all to make during the decision-making process. By no means it's going to be easy to jump them, but and then again, we're going to have to maybe have some sort of discipline around where we need to get to a point. We may need to front load with some money, hard cash. You know, it used to be called invest to save, didn't it? Type things, and so there may be those issues that we will not always meet the principles, but if the guiding aim is to get to the objectives, then it justifies itself. So I'm hopeful. You know, it is the start of us delivering where we want to be. So that's my point of view as a member who's deputising tonight, and that's what I jumped out at me with the objectives and the principles, and that will focus my mind better.
Thanks, Steve. Does anyone else want? Phil?
Actually, I did enjoy reading it, and I also enjoy reading the annual accounts, or 290 odd pages or whatever. So I did go through this, and I highlighted particular bits. I think, as Councillor Fowkes suggested, there are bits that we can interpret in different ways, or bits that we can pull out. Some of us will pull out some bits we like, and others will pull out other bits that they like. I think this is probably the first meeting, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, if the 8.3% reduction has been highlighted. I know it was mentioned elsewhere where I've been, but I think it's right that we get that message out so that there's an appreciation of what it means. The document in page 1.8, page 32 or 12, depending on what size of type I'm going on, that talks about the consultation process, demonstrates we have listened and learned from residents and stakeholders. But if I go to page 115, on page 135 in the big print, there's a section on risks in 2.73. And it talks about potential underachievement, potential underachievement of cost reduction targets following consultation processes. So that implies there's some leeway or scope for argument. If I look at sections 6.43 and 6.44, it's all about the leisure and investment strategy and the library strategy, things that went out to public consultation some time ago, but we haven't seen the detail of the results of those consultations yet. Now, in terms of where money might be spent, as councillors are concerned about the inequalities in the borough, section 3.4 talks about maximising the effectiveness of the financial resources available fairly across the borough. And fairly is always one of those things that causes a lot of debate as to what is fair. So I'll be watching that in detail. The issue that cropped up today, because the announcements in the House, was about social care and spending. And that brings me on to care and capital, because I know that Councillor Nolan and I have been spending some time talking about extra care housing, which is referenced on page 37 or 57, about helping people not being in residential care especially, but being in premises that will help them live fulfilling lives. And there didn't seem to be in today's announcement from the government a lot of detail on where that might happen. So if I take account of what the capital programme says, and this is on page 113, in the section on governance, and this bit I will invite members to have a look at, capital bids can be submitted throughout the financial year for consideration, rather than just having one fixed programme at the start of the year. So I actually welcome that.
Is there a question, Phil? Sorry, have you got a question?
Yes, thanks. Flexibility. I just want to help with filling in the figures. As I've been asked to put a question, I'm going to turn to page 103. And the question is, what are we going to do when things work well and things don't work well? On page 83 or 103 is the value of the View Cinema, for example, which was purchased for 6.8 million and then is now worth 3.65 million. Now, there can be lots of reasons why we did that, which was to bring an income in, which I hope is still coming in. So when we take investment decisions that bring income in, then I hope that they do work out. So if you ask the question, Chair, I'll come to the key, is if things work out well and we were adequately funded, things would go well. If things don't work out well and we've been very tight and tough, what are the risks of being stuck up a creek without a paddle?
Well, the model is primary purpose to make sure that the former position doesn't arise, that we're well sited, and if things aren't going that particularly well, for instance, if our grant funding our business rates position is not as expected, that we're able to make the change, that we're agile enough to make changes to make sure that service delivery isn't suffering from that, and there's a variety of ways that can be done. The medium-term financial strategy is, as outlined earlier, covers the whole range of the financial management model. So when we're cited on that in advance, we should be able as a council to deal with that. Whether that means that we make some tough decisions on changing some of our services, or making some strategic decisions on borrowing or using our money in a different way to achieve the same end.
Stuart, I'm going to bring Paul in as well, if that's all right.
Sorry.
So in terms of whether things go well or not well, that's why we're in the position where we are. We've talked about the structural deficit yesterday. We went through the P&L committee yesterday over the capitalisation. That is why we've made the capitalisation application. That is why we responded yesterday to the Secretary of State over the actions we're going to take to reset the budget. The capitalisation will help us with that, but that's why we are radically looking at next year's budget and resetting the budget, and we'll begin to discuss that with members shortly. And anticipating the shortfall in finance for next year is the discussion we had yesterday, and we will continue to have through the finance subcommittee. There is a structural deficit which we will need to resolve, and that's why we sat and had an emergency P&R yesterday to discuss that.
Thank you. Tom?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, thank you, Stuart, for the work on this and re-looking at it. I have waded through it like Councillor Gilchrist, and as a strategy with numbers, it seems robust. Notwithstanding Councillor Gilchrist's comments on maybe being up a creek without a paddle, and to address what Steve said, a lot of this is front-loaded, and we do have an opportunity here to transform those services. If we look, on page 78 at the capital requirements, I think, to speak to colleagues around the table, it's up to each one of us to ensure that those requirements, those transformation services are future-proofed, because there is headroom in the budget, as Mr Ferris outlined. I mean, the borrowing sums can be quite eye-watering, but if we don't put those in, our regeneration programme is at risk. And let's not forget the government's already given £102 million to the authority this year for regenerational projects through various mechanisms. So, you know, we do need those. We have to work together, each party, to ensure that we make a success of it for our residents, for the jobs, the skills that will bring.
Does anyone else like to speak? Jean?
Thank you for the report. Thank you. Could I just ask, please, obviously throughout the document on page, for example, 40, 31 and page 79, it mentions business cases will be obviously put into place or in place. So where do they go to? Do they come to policy resources, or those business cases, where will they be going to? If I can also ask, it also mentions on page 41 that the group companies will be reviewed. It doesn't say by who and when. I know in the CIFA report it said about getting an independent review as well, obviously under the roadmap of the council finances. I just wondered if that was underway, when it will be happening. And whilst the document obviously all of them mention risk, one of the things that CIFA said is they should be actually scored, and that isn't within this document. So when is that going to change as well? I'm also going to just ask as well, please, do look whatever everyone's pronouncing it as now. Apology if it's wrong. They've changed, obviously, yesterday, didn't they, about how the reporting is going to happen for local authorities on 1st of April 2023. So how will that impact now on, obviously, the medium-term plan? Because that's going to change, isn't it, by April 2023? Thank you.
Try and pick up some of that. You need to correct me. I apologise in advance if I missed some of it. The requirement for an assessment of financial management capability is set out for all councils in the CIPA Financial Management Code. That can be done either independently or within the council. The difficulty with marking your own homework is that you don't have that objectivity and transparency. That is a requirement for an objective assessment of financial management capability. It is good practice, and the CIPA Financial Management Code, whilst it's not set in statute, it is a code that the external auditor may use in terms of you comply or explain why you're not complying with it. So it sets out a requirement for an objective assessment of where you are, and that is good practice. In terms of this particular document itself, the medium-term financial strategy, a realistic MTFS has been a requirement of the DLUP report. It'd be my view we're going beyond that, because we're setting a balanced medium-term financial plan over 5 years rather than the requirement from the Minister, which was proposals to set a balanced MTFS over 3. In terms of DLUP changing site on MTFS, you'll have many councils struggling with that, because they'll be struggling to even balance their budget for 22-23. I think we're in a better place than a lot of councils. Having said that, I wouldn't underestimate the challenge that lies ahead. When you take 8.3% out your net revenue budget, that will mean some change. You'll feel a change from that. Certainly what the strategy tries to do is ensure that as members you're in the best possible place to make a change that will work, and that is looking at the full equation on the financial model. I can't say any more than that, because it looks at every aspect of your income, all your grants, your public borrowing, all the capital receipts coming into the council, and it looks at all the revenue positions and the pressures that you have. Workforce planning is key to that. That is integral to the revenue expenditure, your biggest item of subjective revenue expenditure. So the MTFS itself incorporates all that. Deloitte will expect, as will the external auditor, a decent MTFS. In this, I would commend it to you that it is. And it will reset everything if you can agree a balanced budget on the 20th of February. All things kind of lead from that. It will give you it will give you a hedge in as much as the money that the money that will be required to ensure that there's a buffer in terms of reserves and a reserve strategy within this will allow the council to go forward with the confidence that it can deal with left field issues without any recourse to making changes in normal day-to-day business as usual service delivery.
Councillor Robinson, I think you kind of had three other questions. So the first was around where would the business cases go. So the business cases will come to the finance subcommittee. We're going to come on to that shortly on the business change programme. Second is around where the risks being rescored. So the risks are being rescored as we speak through the audit and risk committee. And the final one I think was around the independent review of the finances. I think this is particularly, I think you're referring to the report where it makes reference to the finance reviews of the companies that we have. And that's we're about to commission that work. We anticipate that CIPFA will undertake that independent review for us. Just to remind members that the recommendations and the appendices to the report last night set out more detail in terms of how we're taking those recommendations forward. And of course, now we've responded to the Second Estate, we'll bring that report, those recommendations, that action plan, will now start to form the improvement plan. So we'll share that going forward with members. But just to give you assurances that all of those three things are underway.
Helen?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Stuart, for the report. Just on point 12.12, could you clarify for me how we could benchmark in terms of the public health grant? I'm aware that, I think it's been mentioned Wirral's unique. I think it's the 19th highest. It's stabilised around 30 million. It's about the 19th highest. In the Northwest, there's only Manchester and Knowsley that are higher per capita. But when you look at the absolute gradient of inequality, most similar CCGs, St Helens and Wigan are about £12.50 less per capita. So how could I benchmark that? How would you suggest I benchmark that with other local authorities in terms of that 30 million?
Councillor Cameron, we have access to a load of, to obviously all other local authority and health area data. So we will look at that and come back to you through Julie Webster and provide you with a written response to that, how we're going to do that. Obviously, I've asked the Director of Public Health to undertake that benchmarking, as the reports were quite clear on not only public health, but other areas where we've got a higher than norm benchmark comparison with other areas. So if you allow me, we'll get a written response to all members around here and how we're going to do that.
Okay. No one else has indicated they'd like to speak. Thank you, Stuart, for, appreciate the level of detail and expertise. So thank you very much. I'm going to move that we agree the recommendations by assent. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Yvonne. Are we happy to approve by assent? Thank you. Okay, so Chair, I'm going to invite you to present the report for agenda item 7, which is 2022-23 budget process. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So in March of this year, I took a report to this committee, Policy and Resources Committee, that set about to agree the budget setting process for next year, which is the year 22-23. That process involved a series of savings proposals, budget proposals, income generation. There was also pressures and growth items that officers had developed in an estimated form at the time, and we're going to consult the Policy and Services Committees and put those proposals through to those committees for ratification by the committees, consideration and discussion. And also to ask the Policy and Services Committees for a steer on what other areas could be sought to contribute to the budget gap for next year. and also to identify the committee's own proposals to help us to bridge the budget gap for next year. Those budget workshops have been undertaken throughout the summer, but at this time, that approach that we've taken has actually failed to generate the savings to bridge the gap for next year's budget 22-23. So we're actually having to look at a different approach now to be able to bridge that gap. The report actually talks about the new approach, which is approach for budget envelopes. And I'm going to invite Stuart back, apologies if you just sat down, to actually just give you a bit of an update on the rationale as to why we've actually taken that approach for budget envelopes and what that process would actually look like for that budget setting for next year. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, in approaching obviously this budget round, the budget process started from a position where known pressures were estimated and applied to the base position, which was the base 2022-23, bearing in mind we had significant information on where we're going this year, which is to outturn a structural deficit of £7 million. So from that knowledge of additional pressures, it was about £26 million worth of pressures. It became apparent that when we asked directorates to formulate the savings, that that particular gap of £27.5 million was stretched too far. 11.26 million of that had been secured. So rather than go back and apply the normal methodology that we would do at this point, which would be asked for a range of further slice and dice savings, that a different approach was required. It became evident that to try and reformulate the budgets for the services, that a more intensive approach was required, and the budget envelope SLT agreed that a budget envelope approach should be deployed. And what that does is it effectively gives each directorate a cash budget or a budget envelope, a basic envelope that the services are required to live within. And we're obviously alive to the fact that the directorates need to translate to service committees. So effectively, when we agree a settlement on this budget, driven through by Policy and Resources Committee, this committee, that the service committees will be required to drive through the necessary arrangements for their services to live within these revised budget envelopes. I had a presentation on this, which I was intended to give at the end of this session. I don't know if it's actually loaded, but effectively we have already engaged with directorates through the SLT process, and from the £27.56 million.
So Stuart, we're going to do that later when this meeting's finished, when it's finished and the webcast has stopped. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So effectively, it's a different approach, an approach that will facilitate the gap by taking a different view on how services are required to live within a revised budget envelope. And the way we get there and the methodology that we use is linked to the medium-term financial strategy principles that we talked about earlier. They need to produce a balanced budget, which is fundamental, the prioritisation of statutory services, the minimisation of cross-subsidisation, and in doing that, also align ourselves with the DLUC recommendations whereby DLUC made recommendations in terms of taking cost out of leisure and a redefinition of central support costs in terms of the resources directorate. And in applying a methodology to do that, I believe that we have made some success in using this revised methodology to bridge the gap, which is substantial, of 8.3%.
Anybody like to ask any questions? I think we can all agree that last year's budget setting process was something we never want to repeat again. So it's good that we've got a different one in place. And so if nobody wants to speak, I'm going to move that we agree the recommendation, approve the revised approach to budget setting for 2022-23. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Can we agree by assent? Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. You can actually sit down now, I think, because it's Tim next. So we're going to go on to agenda item 8, which is change programme. And Tim, you're going to present the report. Thank you.
So if I may, Chair, I'll just introduce this. So following on from the MTFS that we've just agreed, this paper sets out the approach to change, which will be aligned to the financial recovery plan. It sets out the core principles of the approach based on the Wirral plan and the principles set out into the MTFS, and also establishes the role of the P&L Finance Subcommittee in approving and agreeing both the business cases but also the benefits realisation as we start to track the financial recovery plan over the next few years. It recognises that we've had to recast and reset the change plan based on the DLUC reports, and that there will be a number of key changes to the change programme, but also recognising there are a number of programmes underway, particularly around digitalisation and things like the ERP system that are addressing the legacy issues faced by the organisation from a number of years. Focuses on particular areas of workforce, assets, contracts and digital, but also provides the role, sets out the programme governance and the role of the P&R subcommittee in the relationship between senior officers and the P&R subcommittee to oversee the programme governance and the change programme over the lifespan of the financial recovery plan. I'm going to ask Tim to bring in more detail of how the guiding principles of the paper.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair. So as Paul has set out, that the programme will oversee the prioritisation and delivery of service reviews and takes account of the direction in the external assurance reviews from DLUC that financial goals are included from the outset, and work is therefore underway to define the prioritisation model, and it is proposed that this is approved and will be taken to the Finance Subcommittee for approval, who will then oversee the delivery programme, reviewing business cases and providing approval and direction to emerging recommendations. The programme will ensure design principles are embedded into service redesign, moving the Council to a new operating model based on the principles agreed in the Wirral Plan. The intention of the operating model is to be the vehicle by which the Council can ensure it has the right capabilities, processes and technology to deliver the agreed vision, policy and plans as set out by elected members. The programme recognises that service reviews must acknowledge our different and diverse communities and will bring forward an approach as to how we will use our data and intelligence to marry the needs of people living in our communities with the physical plans for each place. This report provides context and direction and recommends that detailed scrutiny is undertaken by the Finance Subcommittee. Welcome any questions, Chair.
Do I have? Okay. Aha. Okay, so Phil, you were first, then Jeff.
Thanks very much. I just want to understand the relationship between the Finance Subcommittee, which I think Councillor Green and I sit on with many number of other members, and the mechanism that reports back to members and the speed at which views are conveyed back to members. So what is the process, if I may ask, Chair? Finance Subcommittee meets, P&R may not always follow quickly, but there are reports that directors will have which they'll need to raise with elected members as set out in section 310, where it talks about the roles of elected members. So is there a process for communicating with chairs and spokes of service areas so they're kept up to date with the debate?
So I think the revised budget process, and again the papers that we referred to last night, sets out a response to the challenge of both the leadership and governance report and the report from SITFA, where it was recommended that we established a finance subcommittee to ensure we were able to provide the financial recovery plan. This paper proposes that the finance subcommittee is the forum by which these business cases are developed and agreed, and the business benefits realised. Clearly, there will be a report back from the finance subcommittee into the P&R committee, and therefore then, and I'll look to Phil as the monitoring officer, the reports then will go through to full council as and when required. There will be an increasing role for committee chairs and party spokes in the direction of those savings. But again, in both the Leadership and Governance report and the SITFA report, it highlighted the increasing role of P&R committee in the subgroup of providing direction and steer on the financial recovery plan.
Jeff?
Thanks, Chair. And, you know, I could talk about this for some time, but you'll be delighted now I'm not going to. And again, just to be clear, I have argued, as people around the table will know, for a considerable length of time, the members needed to be involved in the overarching governance of our change programme. We've had several goes at it with varying degrees of success in terms of change programmes, but I appreciate the governance that's now been put in place. Key element of this, and why I wouldn't wanted to get hung up in delegations and so on potentially, is around pace. It is no good at all if programme managers, portfolio leaders, whatever it is, are coming back to finance subcommittee or SLT or whatever it is and saying, you know, these are the key steers that we need. We want you to do this, we want you to do that, we want you to do the other thing. If we then have to wait for the full council to meet before you can get that decision, that's going to just slow up the change programme, one presumes. So that balance between engagement, involvement and reporting back, I think is important. In whatever structure we put around this, I think that's going to be important. You know, Tim has kindly offered to brief me, to talk to me around some of these things, which I will happily take him up on, and so won't delay the committee tonight. But it does strike me that a number of key lessons have been learned from previous iterations of the change programme, and it seems to have all the right elements in place as a structure on which we can build a successful, benefits-orientated change programme. So that's good, I think.
So welcome those comments, Councillor Green. The pace is a really key point because we will need to make decisions quickly, but clearly that balance of political cover is really, really important. I think we have a really good example of that, though, in terms of what we've done over the last 12 months, particularly around the ERP system, which we have had to move at real pace, and we've had member involvement and scrutiny all the way along, and I believe that has worked particularly well in providing both assurances to members that the system that we're going to have is effective and it's not leaving us exposed, but also enabled those decisions to be made really, really swiftly. So I think we have an example already of where we have made it work, and that's the basis we need to do that on. And appreciate that we have 66 members of the council that do need to be kept updated, but we have a benefits realisation plan and a financial recovery plan that we have to deliver on over the next 3 years, as Stuart has indicated.
Okay.
From what Councillor Green was asking. Yes, yes, no, I was listening. If I may, Chair, and I heard what Mr Satur said latterly about the 66 members, but also what was said before about coming back to council. And there was a question was raised about delay and timing. Would it not be wise to build in a process of promptly conveying the discussions at Finance Sub to the spokespersons of the service area being examined and changed so that they can speed up work or be involved as necessary?
So I have to say, as head of paid service and with experience of over 25 years of substantial change programs and transformation, that from a professional point of view, that will not work. But I will leave that for members to discuss of how you... Clearly, I want to satisfy members and I need political cover, but I also need to ensure the stability, the security of the organisation in the delivery of major change programs. And we will have contracts to fulfil, we'll have third-party relationships to manage, and we'll also need to secure and retain the confidence of the workforce.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Tim, thank you. Oh, and congratulations on your relatively new position, but it's a few months now, isn't it? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move that we agree the recommendations contained on page 147. Do I have a seconder? Can we agree by assent? Thank you. Okay, section C, work programme. Phil, you're going to speak to this. Thank you.
Very brief, Chair. This is the report that comes to all of your meetings, although very aware this time of the decision yesterday about future agenda. It's the work programme. Page 166 sets out the upcoming key decisions, and it's there for your noting and comment.
I don't see anyone's hand up, so can we... I'm going to move that we note the work programme. Have a seconder? Yep. Okay, we agree by assent. Thank you. So moving on to section D now, which is referrals from committees, council. If members are happy to agree, I think I'm minded to move to look at these en bloc. They've all come from committees and they've all come with unanimous approval from the committees. So if that's okay, everyone's nodding. So can we... I'm going to move that we agree by assent all of the next three sets of recommendations, or do you need to do them separately?
No, that's fine. Just need a second.
Seconder? Okay, thank you. Can we all agree by assent? Thank you. There's no other items on the agenda, so I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. I'm aware there's a bit of a footy match on tonight, so we won't keep you here too much